back. Chapter 5. What makes a perfect parent?
What does make a perfect
That
parent?
is a great question. And I guess there's no such thing as a perfect parent, but we can see what makes a bad parent in this book. And
it's basically like nature versus nurture. Basically that whole thing, like where a child grows up, like, and how their parents like treat them in the first like year, and then 3 years and 5 years, and like what they're like exposed to. Like if you, like, I don't know if you ever heard that like when you're pregnant, if you put like music
or read to your stomach and stuff,
like they'll be like more intelligent. Like if that's what really makes it, nobody can really tell because you can't see that data. Like you can't, and it constantly changes. It says how like you'll read one thing. I know that like I don't think you're allowed to have fish, but like I think my mom said like that when she was pregnant, like that wasn't even a thing. Like nobody even knew about that. So like things have just completely changed, and like they're constantly being like, what's that called? Constantly being like contradicted. Constantly being contradicted by like new studies that are coming out. So
yeah, a lot. It actually talked about like kind of like parenting books in here again, like the media, I guess, like what it shares the information with, and like kind of the information that it shares with parents. They think if they follow that word by word, they will be great parents, but it's not always. They're not always thinking of like their children's best interest. Like just because the majority of the kids think this and it's posted in a parenting book doesn't really mean it's best for your child. And I think a lot of parents don't really realize they're doing that, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, every parent too has like a different idea of what being the perfect parent is too, because like sometimes like you walk through the store and like you see like a mom yelling at like her 4-year-old kid and you're like, oh my god, like I can't believe she's doing that and stuff. But then like another person could walk by and like see her parent completely cave into the kid and they would think that's the bad parenting. So I think it kind of depends on the family too.
Really well said.
Fear is like also like a really big thing when it comes to parenting. Like fear of like having your child grow up and like not becoming something like good out of themselves, and like even fear of just like accidents happening. I know it talked about that like with the girl, and her name was Molly, and the parents and like her friend Amy had a gun in her house, and then her friend, I think it was like Imani, had a swimming pool, and like they thought that like obviously going to a kid's house with a gun and is like more dangerous than a swimming pool, but actually like that's completely not true, because didn't you say there's like a statistic?
Yeah, there is 100 times more likely chance to drown in a backyard swimming pool than they are to die while playing with a gun.
I just think that's like crazy to think about, because like you would think swimming pool is harmless, but like so many kids are hurt.
It depends on the parent and who's watching them, because
sometimes parents don't watch their kids. They're like, oh, it's just a pool, like it's not even that deep, they won't die, but you never know.
I think guilt is also a big part too. Like if you don't, like along with fear, like guilt if something does happen to yourself, like how are you gonna feel? But like honestly, like I think you really just gotta go with your gut when you're like parenting, like not listen to everything that's said, because odds are it's gonna be wrong in a few years. That's what I got out of this.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. And
all right, want to continue?
Chapter 6 is also on parenting, part 2.
Parenting part 2, naming the children and stuff. So
this was basically about how like the name you give your child not defines who they are, but how did you word that before?
Like naming your child doesn't define who you are. Like it kind of just limits your opportunities. It doesn't like set limits on how successful you could be, but like you are given obviously less opportunities, like especially when the one they sent in like an application, and the one was for named Deshaun and the other I think was Connor, and Connor got a call back and Deshaun didn't, and that just like doesn't mean that Deshaun is like any less qualified, because they both had the same qualifications, but like whether the person was racist or just like saw the name was like, oh, they can't do like what we need them to do, just like really limits their opportunities, but it doesn't change like how successful they could be in real life.
Yeah, it talks a lot in the book about like the differences between like primarily like Black names and like white names. Like, do you think that those differences are like good or kind of bad as a person? Just an opinion question.
I mean, do you mean like, what do you mean?
Like, you know how like the kid's named Deshaun are most likely Black and the kid named Connor is most likely white. Like, you're not going to find like a white kid named Deshaun most likely. Like, do you think having like named differences like that are like a positive thing?
I think it depends. Because sometimes, like, they have names that come, like, from, like, their culture, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, that's not a bad thing. Like, it's your culture, do you. But at the same time, like, the fact that people look at the names differently because of
like racist
where they
people
come from,
judge
that's
like,
when it
the
gets
name.
bad.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly like it did there, but it's kind of bad. Like, it's like they can't really share their culture. Like, they have to come into our culture just so they can get, like, they're taken seriously and, like, treated like everybody else, which is sad.
The book also talked about a family, and they were the Lanes, and they named their one son Winner Lanes, and then their final son, the seventh son, was Loser Lanes. And everybody thought, like, Winner, he was going to be, like, exceptional, like, the best he could be, but, like, nobody, like, had any prior, like, consumptions about Loser, but then Loser, they call him Lou, so I'm just going to call him Lou, I feel bad.
Yeah.
Ended up, like, becoming, like, the perfect child and was in the New York Police Department and all this stuff, and eventually, like, a sergeant and all this stuff. And Winner went to jail and was just awful and was just a criminal all around, and, like, they did come from an African-American family, but, like, obviously names don't have a big, like...
I wonder if, like, those names kind of, like, gave them expectations of themselves that, like, Winner probably felt like you couldn't really reach up, and Loser was probably like, I'm going to do so much stuff, and they're going to never wish they named me Loser, because, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a loser if my name was Loser.
Yeah, I just think it's awful.
Yeah.
How, like, a name could define you, because, like, if you didn't know their names and saw their, like, everybody's qualifications, like, I just think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, that's very true. We should just get rid of names
Get
all together.
You're right.
Be like, hey, you.
Okay.
Any last
Anything
words? I didn't mean to say nothing now.
No, I think we got it.
Well, that's Freakonomics.
Fascinating stuff. Have a nice holiday.
Have a nice holiday.